Adam Abid, now that I know that this is being...
I'm terrified what you're going to say.
Won't you come and swap with me? Thank you very much. I find standing behind a lectern something impossible to do. Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm going to speak quite quickly because I don't want you to listen to every word I say. I want you to feel what I say. When you leave here, you must be emotionally drained, but filled with the prospective energy that you will utilize in order to respond to some of the things that I'm going to challenge you with. So what I'm going to talk about, knowledge matters, particularly in Africa, and also higher education's responsibility. Is it working? Yes. There are many benefits to higher education, and this sort of thing came out of the Harvard University, the World Bank, and they gave a sense of what. This is not good. These are some of the benefits, and you can just look at them to get a sense of what higher education says it does for you. And now that you've looked at them, I'm going to go on. This is a map of the world, and you see that part of it that I've placed a little rectangular frame, and that indicates the part of the world which, when the diaspora occurred and people left Africa and settled in there, it's in that part of the world that all the great intellectual leaps of our species occurred, all of them, and this thing is very. And these are some of the outcomes from that part of the world. Lots of different ways of knowing. And the more you know about knowing, and the greater your range, the better the chance that when you are confronted with a particular challenge, that you know which way of knowing best serves the response here. Give you the challenge of South Africa and HIV and AIDS. The best way of knowing was science, but we chose our religion and we chose our cultural beliefs. And so we did not pick the best way of knowing. And part of the challenge of education is to be open to many ways of knowing and to make those good decisions. And these are some of the great intellectual leaps: classical antiquity, the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, the digital revolution, and the analytical revolution that they say is with us now. But this is not evenly distributed. Some parts of the world have very little of that at their command, and that's part of the challenge of humankind. The very notion of humanity urges us to begin to give attention to that. And to the universities, the ethics of care. What are the parts of the planet which are not well served with respect to ways of knowing and therefore are vulnerable, and how we as a university system might we support them? We already know this about our destiny on Earth. There's the sun, then comes the... Wait, this is very bad. This clicker is just not clicking. It's very slow. Our sun's fate, it begins a little star there, then it becomes a red giant there, then it becomes a part of the nebula, it becomes a white dwarf, and eventually it says just nothing. And we know that lies ahead for us. I spoke to a group of students about it not too long ago, and they said, what? Is this actually going to happen? Well, our sun's fate, this is not good. Here is the sun dying at the moment, and that's what's going to happen. It becomes big and it engulfs things, and they say almost all of our solar system will be engulfed by our sun when it does that. And 1 billion years from now, all of Earth's water will have boiled away. 1 billion years from now, there'll be no water on Earth. So either we're all dead by then, or we have evolved so that we can live without water, which seems unlikely because everything that moves, whether it be plants or anything else, has water as a major component. So there's a very important set of challenges lying ahead there. And then this is what it looks like 3 billion years from now, the scorched Earth. So you're going to either have to be a Teflon kind of person, being able to operate it, or you would have done this, that have left the planet. And they are now looking at plasma, and they say there's a prospect here with plasma. In other ways of knowing, the scientific way of knowing, there's a prospect with plasma, except that plasma is so hot, it will burn up that other thing. It can provide a propulsion, but it just will destroy it. Now, how do you then manage to find a way to keep the plasma controlled so that it doesn't do that. Ways of knowing. Imagine the poor people that don't have that way of knowing, and when they see these things go, say, oh God, what's happening? So in the interim, though, between now and then, we are on the planet. And we have decided, in some way, to embark on a majestic quest. We're going to be different from any other species on this planet, we humans. We're going to care for one another. We're going to understand that there is we create a notion of humanity, and we say, this notion must guide the ways in which I engage with you. And so we try to create heaven on earth, and it's a very majestic thing. And this is what Barrett speaks about, the 7 levels of consciousness which we now believe that we humans operate in. It's a spectrum. It goes from survival to service, and we operate in all of them. But some of us more at survival, we'll take whatever we need, and if you've got something and I don't have it and I need it, I'll take it. And others more at the level of service, like the Tutus of the world and the Mother Teresa's. They operate in that. But all of us operate like this in that spectrum. So, so here's a proposition that knowledge matters for survival. Just spoke about survival. In order to survive, you must have knowledge. And so, this is very hard. It's not good. One second for that. Computer. Yeah. Let's try. You see, they've got no other way to do it here. There's no keyboard here. It can only be done this way. And you see that it is. Yes, that's right. It's not working at all. Okay. So, I was going to do a poem. The poem is called Caravels, and it speaks about relationships, and it speaks about us and what we're capable of, the majesty and the opposite. It goes this way. It says, there was an Indian who had known no change, who strayed content upon a sunlit beach gathering shells. He heard a sudden strange commingled noise, looked up and gasped for speech, for in the bay where nothing was before, moved on the sea by magic huge canoes, with bellying cloths and poles and not one oar, and fluttering coloured signs and clamouring crews. That's the boat, that's what he looked at. And he alone, fluttering coloured signs and clamouring crews. And goodness, I've just lost it. Let's try again. There was an Indian who had no change, straight content upon the sunlit beach gathering shells. He heard a sudden strange commingled noise, looked up and gasped for speech, for in the bay where nothing was before, moved on the sea by magic huge canoes with fluttering coloured signs and clamouring crews. And he alone, this naked man alone, his fallen hands forgetting all their shells, looked up and gasped for speech. And, sorry, I'm losing it. The story is that he looked up and gasped for speech, for in the bay where nothing was before, moved on the sea by magic, these huge canoes. And then he looks up and gasps for speech. He kneels low behind a stone and stared and saw and did not understand. Columbus's doomed burdened caravel slunk to the shore and all her seamen land. So he had no understanding at all of what he was looking at. He saw these ships that were strange to him, but he didn't understand there was a threat attached to those ships. And so like a child, when he sees a lion, the child will walk right up and pat a lion because he doesn't know. So if you do not have the experiences, of the knowledge experiences, you are vulnerable. And so we find in this that this is what they brought along with them. They brought arms and they brought disease. And just read about Hispaniola and the numbers of people who were killed and taken into slavery. But we had our own process like that. And this is Jan van Riebeeck landing in 1652. And the Khoisan approached and stand and saw and did not understand what each consequences of that would be for them. Their culture as it was would be decimated and destroyed. And then comes colonialism. And colonialists don't come to give. They don't come to say, look guys, all of that wonderful knowledge that we've been creating to the north, mathematics and everything else, we're going to share that with you. They come for a different purpose. They come to take all the low-hanging fruit, and when it's gone, like De Beers and others have done now, they go, they leave and say, please take over South Africa. When you've got to dig 4 kilometers down, now you can die. So there's a consequence to these things, but to stand and see and to understand is the big challenge. If I don't understand, I'm in trouble. And so the Sahara Desert, you see it there. It's bigger than the United States. It's an impediment to people coming down to give new knowledge. But also it's so big and people are scattered. And so these huge intellectual engagements do not occur. And because they don't occur, there is no deep sense of all the ways of knowing that are possible, and as a consequence of which making the choices then that give you the best chance of survival. And here's an outcome of that. This is about poverty in the world, outcome of that. The human index, the ways in which people live in the world is an outcome. The darker colors are the colors of those with the lowest development index. This is about science and research and access to modern knowledge and innovation. You see what Africa looks like relative to the rest of the continent, the rest of the world across there. That's Africa. And so there's a knowledge issue that attended that inability to stand and see and understand. And new patents have to do about the creativity in a culture, your ability to be able to engage critically with it and to say critical things and have the culture embrace those criticisms. You see there, that's new patents, that's our scale of our work with patents, and there's Japan, and that's Samsung, that's South Korea. And so there are big knowledge challenges which result in those profiles. This is what South Africa did apartheid, balkanization. You see all of these little pieces there? They created then these homelands, and the big part there is the part that was available to the few. And what was their role? What were they doing? They were dividing, they were ruling, they were dominating and controlling, and those are the sorts of ways in which they did it. This was the message being put out there. You are not permitted here, you are not one of us, and keep your place. It's also about the ability then, when you have control and you have power, how you can relate to the other in a way that is dominating and controlling. And this is what an example in 1982 about education, about the amount of money given to each of a child per capita by the education system in 1982. For the African, that was about just over, for white South Africans, just under 1,000 rand. For Indian South Africans, just under 600 rand. For coloured South Africans, just under 300 rand. And for black South Africans, just under 200 rand. Now, what does this mean? What's the story? The story is that this group here is being kept away from ways of knowing, ways of being able to understand the world and respond to it. And as recently as 1994, this was the case. And to imagine that it will be possible forever for a single group of people, rather small, to be able to, a single group of people, rather small, to be able to exclude 90% of their geniuses from participation in the growth and the welfare of the economy of the nation is a fantasy. It's just madness. But yet, from the side of the white South Africans, that was the madness that was brought into. That was the standing and seeing and not understanding on their part. How can you possibly have this happen in that way? And so this is the way in which we responded to it. There was a struggle. It was led to a struggle for education. It was led to education. Led to its struggle through education. So what happened was, the struggle was for a better educational dispensation, and the site of struggle that was chosen as a consequence of a whole range of factors was the school and the university, the black schools and universities. We find then from 1994 to almost from 1976 to almost 1993 to 1994 that there's a great deal of turmoil. Why? We want education. We're not getting it. We're fighting you for it. So what would have been our expectation as a consequence of this great drive for education and almost destroying the schools that we were in as a consequence of that? What would be our expectation? That come 1994, there would be an incredible a mass of energy that's going to be thrown behind the education project. We used it to fight, and we fought for it, and we've won the battle. Now let's give expression to it. And what happens is something different. There's no pedagogy for transformation that's developed on that time. There's no long view about what happens after we are victorious. And there's a belief that breaking down equals growing. It's a standing and seeing and not understanding, which says if I break something down, it's the same as if I created the new. And we know, of course, that is not the case. And so in the 20th century, destroying a building in 1994. So no learning culture appropriate to the end of the 20th century was created. We had a big struggle for education, through education, and created nothing to carry us forward with respect to education. So this is the South African challenge then in 1994. This is what we must now respond to as free South Africans. Now we've got to build the democratic state. We've got to integrate ourselves into competitive and international production and finance. We've got to be in the world. And then, of course, we've got to reconstruct our social, domestic, social, and economic relations to deal with the ravages of apartheid. It's a major challenge, and this is one that is preoccupying us at the moment. So, here's the next proposition. Knowledge matters for sense making. If you don't have the knowledge, you can't make sense of things. So I've said knowledge matters for survival and shown you the difficulties for survival if you don't have the knowledge. Now let's look at the sense making. Cultures are knowledge amplification systems, says Jerome Bruner. What does he mean by that? If you want to understand the culture, understand what knowledge is being amplified and what not. So if you're in Argentina or in Europe, the knowledge about soccer is something that everybody is bought into. If you're in the United States, it will be about basketball and baseball. You know very little about soccer, beginning to know some about it now. So knowledge amplification system. So what is our culture currently, the one we create? We are free to create after 1994. What are its big messages? What is it putting out there as a message for the nation? This is what we are and this is what we will do. So I come to sense making. This is sense making. Sense making. And this is an interesting slide. I chose that to represent the number of South Africans who would have been middle class and better in 1994. And it's rough. It's not scientific, but more or less. And then the numbers of South Africans who would be struggling. So what is this victory of ours all about? What is our constitution all about? What is humanity all about with respect to that slide, this slide? And it says that this can't continue. This must change. And the living standards of this group of people cannot remain what it is and must be moved to another level. And so this then is the South African post-1994 challenge. Think about it in another way. That this is the fiscus. All the money that the government gets in order to manage this country and improve the life of these South Africans there is represented here. The taxes and everything that comes out of here, and of course whatever can be got out of here by that. So that's it. So the question is, how does it change? What's the standing and seeing and understanding that you now have to say, this is how we're going to change this thing? Well, one of the ways is to say, we take all their money and share it equally amongst everybody, and that's the story's over. But of course, the arithmetic says it doesn't work that way, because you can only share it once, and when you share, say, a billion here with the 1%, and with nothing here with the almost 90%, the outcome is 100,000 to each. Not a billion. That's the life of a billion. So you can't move this there as a consequence of redistribution. Now once you understand that, you know, what now? How do we do this thing? Well, you begin to understand that everything that is possible is being taken from there. Perhaps when you nationalize, you can get a little bit more out of it. But the future of South Africa depends completely on what happens here. What happens in the minds and the hearts and the energy of the people who were excluded. That's the key to the future. So what 1994 ought to have been a time of pronouncing this new truth, this big truth. And the universities should all have been in that game, talking about the big truths. You know, this is the way to do it. It didn't happen. So cultures are modern. This is one of the big truths. That we will start the new South Africa, not with a base of 5, but with a base of 1.5. What do I mean by that? Well, I did the sums around what was given to white children for education and what was given to black children, and then divided it, this new pool, which is the pool post-1994, which is the same amount of money, 23% of the fiscus, and you divide it by now the 10 and not the 1 and the rest, and the answer comes out to 1.5. There's 5 rand for a white child. When you do the redistribution, it comes to 1.5 rand for everybody. So everyone's unhappy. The FI says, good God, this is not a good education system. Look what they're doing. We want small classes. The ones are saying, hey, man, goodness gracious, what did we fight for to go from 1 to 1.5? And there's a group of people called the twos. The twos would be those who already had a little bit more, and I showed you there. And they say, good God, we fought a war. We went to jail. We were killed. And the first fruits of our victory are we lose and we go from 2 to 1.5. That's the community that you would call the coloured community in South Africa. And so there's a story to be told here about why this is so. But the story is never told. So there are stories now in the Cape Flats of any other kind of respect to why this is happening. Black people don't like Peter Paul, they want us to vote for Zille, whatever the stories are. But the real story is that this was the base we were going to start from. And every one of us had to roll up our sleeves and get going for the next 30 or 40 years to build a better base on the basis of what was happening down here. Good schooling, real energy going into these things, saying, this is for my nation. That didn't happen. This is what ought to have happened. There ought to have been a national discourse on education, where the state and all of its organs speaks to the school and all of those different aspects of what schools do and what they are. The learners are brought into this game because they are critical to this game. Because education, unlike any other enterprise, depends on reciprocity. You can't make a thing in education. It's a relationship between two people, teacher and the learner or the learner in school. And then the community. All of those had to be called together in a public discourse to say, this is the deck of cards apartheid has left us with. It's a 1.5 deck of cards and not a 5 deck of cards. What's the story here? How do we win people into that engagement? It didn't happen. Instead, what we did was we wrote the most incredible constitution imaginable. And inside that constitution, we put a Bill of Rights that says, you have a right to a house, but we only got 1.5. And so on a daily basis now, we find our poor government running from place to place, putting out the fires about service delivery, because the money's not there. It was never there. So when it wasn't thinking about going forward, it should have been on the side saying, here is a wonderful constitution and look after your rights. But here are the ones that relate to money. We will work together, all of us. And if we work together, we will be able to accomplish the goal of in 20 years, 25 years, everyone will have a home. And to say you have a right to a home and you don't have the money, that wasn't good thinking. So South African education and quality, education system and its standards are under extreme scrutiny, and the general impression supported by both workplace and post-school experience points to a nation that has lost its way educationally. And so the universities again come in with the incredible role that they've got to play. So why did this happen? It was a question of sense-making in 1994, sense-making. No national education discourse. No vision for education. The belief that struggle had produced passionate, dedicated teachers and learners hungry for knowledge, which just was a given. There was no assembling of the groups of people as we assembled during struggle to talk about what we're going to do now. They were all just there. Teacher education development not a priority. No strong state management of schools. South African Schools Act empowered governing bodies to choose all staff members without guidance. Can you imagine a village where the governing body it's all just local people, and they must make the important decision to choose the principal of that school? What basis would they do it on? From? And so it was a wonderful moment of the outpouring of a sense of goodness and fulsomeness and holiness almost, but it wasn't good sense, and we find ourselves in difficulty. Absence of community development strategy. We have no community development project. If we want to build this country, we've got to build communities and put the power back there. But it's not there, and it's not being encouraged. The power of teacher unions, no strong professional sense, and not evidence of communities of practice. Well, this is true. But the other day, I had a meeting with Satu, a fairly senior person in Satu, and what I heard was so made me so happy. There's a thinking now about what actually other problems are and how these problems must be dealt with. And I'm far more confident about us now than I was just last week. Curriculum change the answer. Curriculum change the answer. That's what we do. We have a problem, we say let's change the curriculum. What's this education? Outcomes-based. Outcomes-based education. OBE, the evolutionary response to gutter education. Hey! You couldn't say anything about it. Boom, 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 boom. Ask Jonathan Jansen. Boom, 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 boom. When you said something about it. Curriculum 2005, there was no possibility of implementing it successfully. Just a bit of thought. Like for Woods, just a bit of thought. There was no possibility that you could do with the apartheid and it would survive forever. A bit more thought. So, Too challenging, too expensive, no budget for textbooks. Do you know that they didn't budget for textbooks? Really didn't, when outcomes-based education was introduced. In South African form, epistemologically, fatally flawed, and it comes the tragedy of what I call March 2000, where there was a question McCarthy asked Mal about whether or not we take outcomes-based education into high schools. And one province said, don't do it, we can't do it, and that was the Western Cape. All the other provinces says, we're ready, we're ready. We sit now with the problem there. Central belief. Almost all learners can succeed if enough time and attention is given to them. That's the central belief, and it's a great one. Makes sense. Each learner develops mastery of each task at predetermined level and then proceeds to the next. Only then. Not age-bound and not time-bound. Imagine a child can stay in grade 1 for 10 years. No, he wouldn't be in grade 1. He'd be doing a particular problem or challenge in grade 1. At grade 1 level, while he does something else at grade 3 or 4 level. So this is the most complicated but most wonderful conception of education imaginable. But we had no time for it, and we didn't have the money for it. Time, labor, and resource intensive, as well as complex learner management challenges. Not one of these possible in South African schools at the time. With a bit of thinking, we would not have gone there. So come March, I'll tell you that. Spain. So he said what he said, never mind. Here's another bit of sense making, with a bit of sense making. Science of the world speaks to you. Says, hey, don't do this. In my church, I'm a Catholic. My Catholic church said, don't go near condoms. How do you deal with this? You're a rector of a big institution. You have 20,000 people. The hormones are doing all what hormones do. And so what do you do? So now you've got to engage with yourself. And some thinking says, I'm sorry, my church, I like you, but you're wrong with this one. And so there are 80 condom dispensers on the walls of UWC. 80. They must be within 1 meter of it. They must think twice. Universities as a system did not engage through all of it. During the apartheid time, universities were not engaging. Those are the historically black universities did engage, but violently. The other universities, well, we know what the other universities did. That was our history. So we didn't go out. And so now comes 1994, there's the opportunity for the universities to speak to the nation, to speak to government. The government doesn't want to listen. Say, you're not making sense of this, people, listen to us. We're the university system, we can tell you the truth. It didn't happen. So along comes Becky with the version of the HIV/AIDS thing. Universities, not single universities. I'm speaking about universities as a system. Nobody listens to UCT if UCT says, you do that. But if all 23 of us say, this is the truth, this is the truth, our people, then we're giving them a challenge with respect to that list of ways of choosing. But we didn't do it. We still don't operate as a system today. We're doing some good things now with HIV/AIDS. We 23 of us all got together 2 years ago, and last year, and this year, and we're doing successful things. And if we can do it for other things in this, do it. Every education index ranking is negative. How much time have I got left? 5. No, let's go past this. I just want to show you this very quickly. This is mathematics in 2009, national benchmark test. This was the national group. It was a pilot group, 6 historically white universities and 2 historically black universities. And the outcome here was that only 738 out of almost 10,000 would have got into those 30 universities against which this was benchmarked. 30 middle-class, middle-level universities across the world. So this is what the average was. UWC was one of the 2 historically black institutions that participated, and there's its profile. 1 out of 250 already accepted for science. 1 out of 250 already accepted for science passed this test that those 30 universities would say is the level that you must be at to get into us. Now the question for us is, in commerce, none. In commerce, the commerce program, but nobody passes that. Now this line here says they're marginal. Perhaps they can make it. And so are these 142 at UWC closer to this or closer to that? And I'll show you. Here it is. Almost all of them closer to the blue. So 6 people out of the entire cohort would have got into those 30 universities. This gives you a sense of our university system as a whole. The level at which, not our university, our school system, the level at which our school system is challenging our people. It's unfair, because there's nothing wrong with these kids' brains. They've got to be challenged and made to work, and shown why they've got to work. There is no future. Now into the other thing, socialism. It's incredibly, I think I'm predisposed towards socialism as a Catholic. But when you believe that you don't need a support and you don't need people to bring their factories into you and you chase them away and believe that out of that can come the resources that you need to run the country. So there's no sense making here. There's no sit down and think some more. Let's say where this goes. What happens when you do that? This is the TIMS thing, grade 8s, last 2011, South Africa. We asked if our grade 9s could write the grade 8 tests. Our grade 9s wrote the grade 8 tests and came second last of the grade 8s. That's where we are as a nation. And we expect that we're going to be able to play soccer against Barcelona, or, I'm just using soccer as an example. So, 142 out of 144 in some areas of education. So knowledge matters for development, and I'm going to go very fast now. No learning culture appropriate to the 21st century. This is what I'm really saying. We do not in South Africa today have a learning culture that says we're going to deal with the challenges of the 21st century. And what are those challenges? What kind of culture must we be in order to meet the challenges of the 21st century? Are we ready to deal with and understand and act at the present reality? Are we developing the competences necessary to transform ourselves rapidly so as to deal with significant current and future social and natural environmental changes? And what vision, leadership, processes, and tools? Who's speaking this language? Who's putting it out there? It can't come from the bottom. The bottom, well, Marx didn't ever believe it comes from the bottom. He had his, telling the story. 21st century challenges, look at them. 10 revolutions are occurring simultaneously. The problem of rapid population growth. The problem of the need for incredible amounts of energy as a consequence of the rapid population growth. The fact that we might have already begun to descend with respect to the peak of the petroleum and other fossil fuels available. There are some still in the middle of the ocean, but to get them out of the middle of the ocean would be so expensive that our country would never afford it. We know about global warming. This is the Earth's surface temperatures, and we see that, and suddenly it's spiking. And these are the various scenarios about how far it's going to spike, but it's there. And the grapes that are growing now will not grow in 10 or 15 years' time. This is what it looked like in the United States in July 2012. That's what happened to it. How do they deal with this? The universities are already dealing with it. Let's just assume that this is the trend going forward. Then we've got to do A, B, C, D, and E. What are we doing? Carbon dioxide emissions. Just look at them. University, UCT is the most derelict of all nations with respect to the challenges that relating to carbon emissions. They have these big cars, as long as this room. And when the piston goes up, poop 1 liter, poop 2 liters, poop 3 liters. Evidence of warming, but it's true. 1909, the Mount Alaska, McArthur Glacier, 2004, it's gone. It's gone. And Cape Town is only 10 meters above sea level. Only 10 meters. When it comes, all of the Cape Flats, can you imagine what lies ahead for us with global warming? All of the Cape Flats finished. So anybody wants to buy houses now, don't go near the Cape Flats. It's Bonnievale or someplace up there. This is the future for low-lying like Cape Flats. It's water scarcity. The international organization has done its modeling and it says, whoa, this is the problem in 2025. South Africa is going to have a physical water shortage. A physical water shortage. Not enough water for us to live. Whereas those browns there are economic water shortages. They make it difficult for you to have a big economy. That's lying ahead. It's like that picture I showed you about the planet in a billion years from now. We know that to be true. So we know what we've got to do. So what are we doing here? What's our thinking? Agricultural production, they say, whoop, look at that. Minus 50% in the night by 2080 with respect to our abilities to feed our nation. I'm going to go right to the end now. Proposition. Knowledge matters for the preservation of humanity, and we take that as hope. That's our hope, that we have good families. This is not our hope. We don't want this. We have the hope of energy, desalination plants. In other words, we're going to develop the technologies to order to deal with that, because it's coming. Work without hope draws nectar with a sieve, and hope without an object cannot live. What does that mean? It says, if you're working, you're asked to do a job, but there's no hope attached to it, no feeling attached to it, then it's useless. But if you are attached to it, then you want to do it, but you don't have an object. What's the object that makes me want to get up every morning and say, this is what I've got to do? And we should have created an object during struggle and post-1994. Every one of us should have been a citizen for South Africa, a champion for South Africa, and given this is the story, degrees by now. UWC ought to be putting out 200, 300 PhDs a year because the passion that we brought with us through the struggle hasn't worked. The role of the university, Castell says we just so important. What is change is we are cultural creatures and we can change. That's the wonder of being human. We can change. This is what Dam Tutefera says. We must develop a new conception of universities given the dramatic changes in our environment. We must forge a new global sense of academic partnerships based on the realization that the citadel of learning institutions is at the heart of any prospect of human survival. He's speaking about the universities of the world as a single organ. All of us, all thinking in the same direction. How do we deal with the challenges coming our way? Not the petty things about who's first in the ranking or second. We kill ourselves about that, Adam. What did you say you're going to be in the rankings? Not that. How do we speak to our people? How do we get our politicians to understand this future? How do we get everybody excited about being part of this great challenge of giving this country an opportunity to live? And so here's the university stuff. New age of universities. We must move, universities must do this together. Governments can't do it. We must move humans in developed countries to understand, build, that they have lived beyond their means and they must prepare themselves for a more humble future. That's what the university, Harvard must be telling that, not Obama. Harvard must now be speaking to his people because Obama can't say it. He can't say well, he's doing it a little bit. to move humans in developing countries, that's us, to understand they cannot use the developed nations as point of reference for their material expectations. You can't go knocking at the door, the government is there, it can't work that way. To move all humans to understand we must develop a wise relationship with our natural environment. It matters. It matters. Then, to move all humans to think of ourselves as earthlings who must work together to secure this future. This applies in international perspective. We must think of the other. The Sudanese are part of us. They are our family. We must look after them and work together to move all humans to understand there's a direct relationship between population growth and the ability of resources. It's a big challenge for the Abrahamic religions, the Catholic religion, and Islam and Judaism. They're saying now you must make some issues here about how many children are on the planet. To move all humans to understand that there is a direct relationship between ownership, competence, and hard work on the one hand and development on the other. Now, by saying to the people, we'll give you a house, we took away from them the responsibility to work for that house. Yeah? And so we beggared our people. Rather than challenging them, say, we're at 1.5, oh God, we can't give you houses, let's work together. And then to move all humans to understand that our security lies in knowledge, in partnerships, and our ability to change. Last thing, government, business, and civil society, and we in the civil society, all together, but it's one set of, one vision about our country. And as Amartya Sen says, what is needed is an agreement based on public reasoning or rankings of alternatives that can be realized. And this is the job of the university. It's our job to help this country to make sense of itself.